Mason Holloway has committed unauthorized clear-cutting in excess of 10% of Pinecrest native ground cover and is hereby assessed $2,500. That's the line that showed up in my mailbox the week after I finished legally permitted state-mandated defensible space around my 15-year-old daughter's bedroom. Not 10%, 41%. Exactly what Colorado law required me to clear in a declared wildfire risk zone. The HOA president had been collecting wildfire mitigation fees from 240 neighbors for 7 years without pulling a single permit. She needed to find the wildland firefighter in her subdivision before he started asking where the money had gone. What she didn't know was that I was already asking. What she really didn't know was that a state investigator was 3 months from auditing her books. So I didn't call. I didn't argue. I opened a folder. I started a ledger, and I waited. Where are you watching from? Tell me below. What would you have done the morning that letter landed in your mailbox? My name is Mason Holloway, and I've spent the better part of my life walking into places most people are running away from. 20 years on wildland crews in Colorado, Wyoming, and Idaho. Type 1 incident commander for the last 8 of those years. I have seen what a 20-mile-per-hour wind can do to a dry slope in July. And I have buried 2 friends who got caught on the wrong side of a spot fire. That's why, after my wife Claire died of pancreatic cancer 3 springs ago, I pulled my savings together, put in my papers, and moved my daughter Piper and me up the ridge to a cedar and stone cabin on 1.2 acres outside Pinecrest Ridge Estates in Jefferson County, Colorado. Piper was 12 then. She's 15 now. She still asks for Claire's banana bread recipe every Sunday morning. I still can't make it taste right. I didn't pick Pinecrest because it was pretty, although it is. I picked it because a man who has watched a neighborhood burn to the ground knows how quickly pretty can turn black. Before we signed a single paper, I pulled the county wildfire risk map, the insurance, fire protection class, and the state defensible space guidelines under Colorado Revised Statute 29-7-202 and the 2021 Wildfire Mitigation and Recovery Act. I measured my setbacks. I planned my clearing zones. I set a 5-year plan before we ordered a moving truck. The HOA president was Cassidy Vanderfelt, 49 years old, blonde, pearl-white Lincoln Navigator, linen blazer in the middle of July. She met me at my mailbox the afternoon we moved in. She offered Piper a welcome cookie in a cellophane bag. She told me I should really talk to her before any outdoor projects, because Pinecrest had a very specific aesthetic. I smiled, said thank you, and filed her name in the back of my head, the way you file a crooked nail you might come back and fix later. Her husband Brent ran a real estate development firm out of Lakewood. He was the kind of man who wore Oakleys indoors and shook your hand 2 degrees too firm. Between them, they had been on the Pinecrest board for 9 years. 4 terms, no challengers. That should have been my first red flag. The summer heat that year was mean. The thermometer on my porch hit 96 for 11 straight days in late June. Every afternoon, the sky over the Front Range turned that particular gold-bronze color that firefighters know means the humidity is below 12%, and the next spark is not a question of if. I put a weather station on the southwest corner of my roof. I watched the wind speeds every morning over coffee. I mapped the 3 evacuation routes out of Pinecrest on a paper copy taped to the inside of Piper's bedroom door. She rolled her eyes. I let her roll her eyes. One day she would not. The second red flag came in June, when I started my defensible space work. I cleared junipers in the 30-foot ignition zone. I thinned lodgepole pines on the uphill side. I limbed up ponderosa to 10 feet. I chipped every last branch and hauled the slash to the county transfer station myself. I did not touch a single neighbor's property line. I did not run a chainsaw after 6 in the evening. I pulled a county mitigation permit before the first cut. The fine showed up the Tuesday after I finished, $2,500. Typed on Pinecrest letterhead, certified mail, with a red stamp across the top that read, Architectural Violation. Line item 1, Unauthorized Landscaping Modifications. Line item 2, Damaging Community Aesthetics. Line item 3, Failure to obtain prior HOA written approval for vegetation removal in excess of 10% of native ground cover. I read it twice on my porch while Piper practiced violin inside. I could hear her working on a scale, up, down, steady as a heartbeat. I set the letter on the railing, walked into my office, pulled a clean legal pad off the shelf, and wrote Cassidy's name across the top. Then I wrote 3 words under it in black ink. Document, witness, file. That was the day she stopped being a neighbor and started being a case. The next morning I drove into Golden, sat down in the Jefferson County Wildfire Mitigation Office, and put my Pinecrest fine on the desk of a woman named Paulette Reyes. She read it, then looked up at me with the flat expression of a public servant who has seen this exact movie before. You pulled a permit, right? Pulled it in April. Cleared under 29-7-202. Closed it out last week. Yeah, she said, sliding the paper back across the desk. This fine doesn't do anything. Their covenants can't supersede state fire code. But I'll tell you right now, they're going to make you prove it. I wrote Pinecrest a response letter that afternoon. Certified mail, return receipt. 2 pages, polite, dry as kindling. I cited 29-7-202, the county mitigation program, my closed permit number, and the fact that the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act prohibits an HOA from enforcing covenants that conflict with state wildfire law. I attached a copy of the permit. I signed it Mason G. Halloway, retired wildland firefighter. I did not raise my voice on paper. On paper, I never raise my voice. Cassidy's reply arrived 6 days later, 3 pages this time. The fine had grown to $3,800. She had added a penalty for failure to respond in the spirit of community cooperation, and a second penalty for unauthorized communication with external agencies. That second one actually made me laugh out loud. Piper heard me from the kitchen and came out to see what was so funny. No. So why? I looked at her. 15 years old, a foot shorter than me, Claire's same steady brown eyes. I had spent 3 years trying to teach her that not every fight has to be fought, but some of them do. Because she thinks no one ever has, I said. Cassidy didn't stop there. The following Thursday, she called an emergency architectural review meeting. I got a notice stuck to my screen door with masking tape. Mandatory attendance. 7 in the evening. Pinecrest Clubhouse. Subject: Halloway residents' vegetation violations. The clubhouse smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. Maybe 30 homeowners showed up, which was more than usual. Cassidy ran the meeting from a raised dais with a Pinecrest logo on the front. She had a PowerPoint. The first slide was a photo of my front yard with the word devastation in red block letters across the top. Mr. Halloway, she said, looking out past me toward the crowd, has engaged in unapproved clear-cutting that has permanently damaged the natural character of Pinecrest and reduced property values for every one of you in this room. People shifted. A woman in the second row frowned. I recognized her from the mailboxes. Marilyn Ashford, a retired librarian who had waved at me the first week. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I walked to the dais, set a single sheet of paper on the edge of the table, and turned back toward the room. That sheet, I said, is my closed county mitigation permit. The work on my property is legally required defensible space under Colorado law. Any covenant penalty tied to that work is unenforceable. You all have a right to a copy of this permit. You also have a right to ask what your HOA dues have been funding under the line item called Wildfire Mitigation Services, because as of today, I haven't seen a single juniper cleared on a common area. The room went quiet. Cassidy's smile locked in place. Her eyes did not. This meeting, she said evenly, is adjourned. She adjourned it 22 minutes into the agenda. On the way out, Marilyn Ashford touched my elbow. She fined me $1,400 last spring, she whispered, for cutting back sagebrush. My late husband and I fought a fire in 2002. I lost him. I nodded once. Then I wrote her name on my legal pad. 3 weeks later, I was in Longmont on a consulting job, walking a client's subdivision and looking at cedar shake roofs and escape routes when my phone buzzed. It was Deke Winslow, my next-door neighbor. Retired electrician, Vietnam vet, the kind of man who waves with 2 fingers from the wheel of a truck. Mason, he said, there's a crew in your driveway. What kind of crew? 3 boys in a white pickup. They're unloading shrubs. Shrubs. Looks like juniper. I was 47 minutes from home. I told Deke to stay on his side of the property line, to not speak to them, and to start recording from his porch if he could do it safely. Then I called Paulette Reyes in the mitigation office and left a voicemail with 1 sentence. HOA is replanting fuel inside a closed permit defensible zone at my address. Please advise. I drove home at the speed limit, not over it. I have watched too many angry men make the wrong decision in the last 2 miles. I passed 2 school buses on Route 74. I passed a sign for the Conifer Fairgrounds. I passed a church with a hand-lettered marquee that read, "Patience is also power." I laughed once, out loud, alone in the cab, and then I kept driving. When I pulled into my gravel turnout, Cassidy Vanderfelt was standing in the middle of my cleared zone with a clipboard. 2 workers were kneeling in the soil. A third was pulling a bald and burlapped juniper off the tailgate of a truck that said Alpine Garden Design on the door. My defensible space had 3 fresh holes dug in it, evenly spaced, like she was redecorating a patio. I stepped out of the truck. I did not slam the door. "Mr. Holloway," Cassidy said brightly, "we are restoring the neighborhood's natural character on your behalf, on my property, in compliance with the CC&RS. Ma'am, you're planting ignition fuel inside a state-mandated defensible space zone." She smiled the way she had smiled on moving day. "We disagree." One of the workers looked up. He was maybe 24, sunburnt, uneasy. I read his jacket, Alpine Garden Design. I took a breath. "Son," I said, "what address did your boss tell you to plant these at?" He checked a work order clipped to his belt. 1247, Ridgeback Trail. "That's my address. I'm the owner of record. Did anyone show you a signed authorization from me?" He looked at Cassidy. Cassidy looked at the clipboard. "We have HOA authorization," she said. "That's not the same thing." The kid set the juniper down. He stood up slowly. I could see the exact moment he understood that he had been handed a job that did not belong to him. I didn't need to press it. I just held out a business card with my name, my license number, and my insurance carrier. "I don't want trouble with you," I said. "Call your boss. Have him call the Jefferson County Mitigation Office. If he still wants you to plant, I'll document it. If he pulls the crew, you're clear. Either way, I'm not touching anything you've already unloaded." He made the call from the cab of the truck. 2 minutes later, the crew was packing up. The third juniper never came off the tailgate. Cassidy didn't leave. She stood in my cleared zone with her arms crossed, the same fixed smile, while her crew drove away. "You are going to regret embarrassing me in front of my workers," she said. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "I'm not the one who brought workers." I turned to Deke's porch and lifted 2 fingers. He lifted 2 fingers back. His phone was still up. He had gotten everything. The work order, the kid's uniform, the juniper on the tailgate, Cassidy in the middle of the zone with the clipboard. That night I labeled the video file Pinecrest_0719_trespass.mp4 and uploaded 3 copies. 1 to an encrypted cloud drive, 1 to a USB stick in my fireproof safe, and 1 to Paulette Reyes at the County Mitigation Office with a 1-line note. "Please date stamp receipt. No action requested yet." The words sat on the page like a match. Piper came into the office in her bare feet while I was closing the laptop. She had a mug of chamomile tea in her hand and a blanket over her shoulders. She set the mug next to me without saying anything, then leaned against the doorframe and watched me for a minute. "You're going to do the thing, right?" she asked. "What thing?" "The thing where you don't do anything for a while, and then you do one thing and it works." I looked at her, 15 years old and already smarter than I deserved. "That's the plan," I said. "Good," she said. And then, quieter, "Mom would want you to." Cassidy's next move came on Pinecrest letterhead, but it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my lender. The letter, dated the last Monday of July, informed Alpine Summit Mortgage that a lien had been filed against the property at 1247 Ridgeback Trail for unpaid HOA penalties, now totaling $7,620. It included the original $2,500 fine, the new $3,800 compounded penalty, a $500 legal preparation charge, an $820 special enforcement assessment, and a boilerplate paragraph warning the lender that continued delinquency may result in property foreclosure proceedings under CC&R Article 9. My loan officer called me a week later with a careful voice. Banks do not like letters like that, even when the letter is nonsense. He wanted to know if we needed a payoff plan. I told him no. I told him we needed a copy of the letter, a lien search at the Jefferson County Clerk's office, and a note in my file that this was under active county review. The clerk's office was where the second surprise was waiting, because no lien had actually been filed. Cassidy had sent a threat letter styled to look like a lien filing. No notary, no recorded instrument number, nothing on file with the county. She had used her HOA letterhead to spook my bank. That is a very specific kind of stupid. Sending a falsified lien notice to a federally regulated lender in Colorado falls under state deceptive trade practices and federal fair debt collection law. You can look it up. Title V of the Colorado Consumer Protection Act and Section 1692E of the Federal Code. I have a friend who teaches this stuff to paralegals twice a year. I emailed her 3 sentences that afternoon and had an answer before dinner. I put the answer in the folder I had started keeping on my desk, a green expanding file with a label that simply read, Pinecrest. 2 nights later, Piper came out to the porch while I was reading. Dad? Somebody at school said we're the reason their mom's going to lose her HOA job. I closed the book. Is that somebody a kid named Tanner Vanderfelt? She nodded slowly. What did you say back? I said, I'm sorry your mom lies for a living. I tried not to smile. I didn't try hard enough. Was that okay? It wasn't kind, I said, but it wasn't wrong. She thought about that for a second, then leaned her head on my shoulder. She still smelled faintly like strawberry shampoo. Claire used to buy it for her in the big pink bottles from the pharmacy on Pearl Street. I still bought the same brand every month. The next week, Cassidy called a second emergency meeting. This time, she had packed the room. Her husband Brent sat in the front row in a navy blazer, arms crossed. She had brought a new PowerPoint. This one had sections. Section 1 was titled Community Safety. Section 2 was titled Holloway Clear Cut. Section 3 was titled Proposed Action, Condemnation Referral. She wanted to refer my property to the county for public nuisance review. Marilyn Ashford stood up before I did. She held a single sheet of paper. I pulled my fine letter from last spring, she said. It's written in the same language as Mr. Holloway's. I'd like this board to explain why I was charged $1,400 for cutting back sagebrush I was required by state code to clear. Deke Winslow stood next. I've been here 11 years, he said. I'd like to see a single receipt for work performed by the wildfire mitigation services contractor the HOA has been billing me for since 2017. The room stirred. Heads turned toward the dais. Cassidy's jaw tightened. Brent stopped leaning back in his chair. This meeting, she said, is adjourned for review. That made 2 in a row she had gavelled short. On my way out, a young woman slid a folded note into my hand. No name, just 10 words. Check the 2019 through 2023 mitigation expense ledger. Line 47. She did not make eye contact. She kept walking, folded her arms across a gray cardigan, and disappeared into the parking lot before I could say thank you. I watched her climb into a dented blue sedan. The bumper had one of those yellow, support our volunteer firefighters magnets on it. I would find out 3 weeks later that her father had been a Pinecrest resident until his death in 2021, and that the HOA had fined him twice in his last 6 months for improper tree thinning near the oxygen tank shed in his backyard. He had paid both fines. He had cleared the brush anyway. Cancer had taken him before a fire ever could. I drove home with the folded paper on my dashboard. It sat there the rest of the night, weightless and heavy at the same time. I didn't open it until sunrise. When I did, the sun was coming up over the ridge, and the cottonwoods were rattling like loose paper in a dry wind. Line 47. Pinecrest Ridge Estates had been collecting a line-item wildfire mitigation services assessment from every homeowner since January 2017. $45 per quarter, $180 per household per year, 240 homes on the books. That worked out to $43,200 a year. Across 7 years, that was $302,400, give or take turnover and a couple of abatements. Line 47. In every annual budget I was able to obtain through a formal records request under Colorado Revised Statute 38-33.3-317, showed that those funds were paid to a single contractor, Summit Ridge Land Services, LLC. Summit Ridge Land Services, LLC, was registered with the Colorado Secretary of State. Sole managing member, per public filings. Brent Vanderfelt, principal business address, a P.O. box in Lakewood that shared a building with his development firm. Paulette Reyes pulled the county records. In 7 years, Summit Ridge Land Services had not filed a single mitigation permit, not closed a single slash haul, not requested a single county cost share reimbursement from the Colorado State Forest Service. They had not, by any measurable county metric, performed a single day of wildfire mitigation. $302,000 had left the homeowner's pockets. According to the county, the work it paid for did not exist. The paperwork made my hands cold. I am not a lawyer. I am a fire guy. But 20 years of federal incident reports and interagency cost-share agreements teaches you what fraud smells like. This smelled like fraud. Worse, it smelled like an HOA president and her developer husband had been laundering community dues through a shell contractor and then fining anyone who questioned the landscape for unauthorized modifications. Because of course you find the man who cuts junipers. The last thing an embezzler wants is a homeowner doing the work they're pretending to do. I sat at the kitchen table with the green Pinecrest folder open in front of me. Piper was at school. The cabin was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the wind against the window glass. The morning sun caught the rim of Claire's old coffee mug on the shelf above the sink. I still washed it once a week. I still never drank from it. I thought, for a long minute, about what it would cost me to walk this all the way down the road it was pointing. Cassidy would make it personal. She would smear my daughter. She would try to burn me out of Pinecrest before she went down herself. People who have been stealing for 7 years do not surrender in week 8. I also thought about Marilyn Ashford's $1,400, Deke's missing receipts, the young woman who had slid 10 words into my hand, the 22 other families I had not met yet, who had been paying into a line item that pretended to protect them from the very fire I had spent my career fighting. I picked up my phone and dialed Paulette Reyes. She answered on the second ring. "I'd like to file a formal complaint," I said, "with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, the Colorado Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, and the Jefferson County District Attorney's Economic Crimes Unit, in that order." She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "I was wondering when you'd call." That was the moment the story stopped being about my yard and started being about everyone else's. Over the next 4 weeks, I built a file the old-fashioned way: paper, tabs, chronology. I started with the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, Section 38-33.3-317. Under that statute, any member of an HOA has the right to request and receive financial records within 10 business days. I sent Pinecrest a certified letter requesting 7 years of ledgers, bank statements, contractor agreements, and board meeting minutes. Cassidy ignored the first letter. I sent a second with a CC line to the State Attorney General's office. 10 days later, a thick FedEx envelope landed on my porch. Paulette Reyes met me in Golden with 2 of her colleagues, a wildfire mitigation compliance officer named Chief Harlan Briggs, and a lean, quiet investigator from the State Division of Fire Prevention and Control named Yvonne Keene. The 4 of us sat in a small county conference room with the Pinecrest ledgers spread across the table. The numbers told the story on their own. $302,000 in services rendered, 0 mitigation permits pulled, 0 county cost share claims, 0/transfer records, 0 inspection logs. Summit Ridge Land Services existed on paper, on a checkbook, and nowhere else. Chief Briggs tapped the ledger once. "Mason," he said, "this isn't a dispute. This is a case." "I know. We're going to have to do this the right way. That means county first, state second, media third." "I understand." He looked at me for a long beat. "You ready for what happens after?" I thought about Piper. I thought about my cedar porch. I thought about the ridge behind my cabin, where the wind comes down at 60 miles an hour in March. "I've been ready since I read the fine," I said. Then we went to work. Yvonne Keene opened a formal investigation under State Wildfire Fund mismanagement statutes. Chief Briggs scheduled a countywide audit of Pinecrest's mitigation compliance, which, I soon learned, had been overdue since 2020 and quietly deferred. Paulette Reyes pulled permit histories for every HOA-managed subdivision in Jefferson County to confirm the pattern wasn't wider. I filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's Consumer Protection Section, citing deceptive trade practices under Title V. I filed a parallel complaint with the Jefferson County District Attorney's Economic Crimes Unit, including the fake lien letter sent to my lender as Exhibit A, under Colorado criminal statutes for attempted fraudulent encumbrance. I sat down with Renee Callahan, a reporter from the Denver Post who had been covering HOA abuse cases for 2 years. She took notes for 3 hours. She asked good questions. She asked hard questions. She asked me twice if my daughter was safe. I told her yes. She said, "Off the record, these people always try to break the children first. Protect her." I installed 2 more trail cameras along my property line. I filed a preemptive harassment complaint with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, so there would be a record on file if Cassidy escalated. I told Piper we were going to have a quiet month. I told her she wasn't in trouble. I told her I was going to win, and that winning was going to look boring for a while. I called Marilyn Ashford and Deke Winslow and asked them to sit down with me at the library. I spread the file on the table. I walked them through the numbers. I told them they had standing to join a formal petition to remove the board under Section 38-33.3-303. Members can file for removal of a director who has committed a breach of fiduciary duty. Marilyn didn't hesitate. "I want my $1,400 back." Deke didn't hesitate either. "I want to know which of my neighbors have been played." By Labor Day weekend, we had 19 signatures. By the Friday after, we had 42. The petition required 50. I walked the Ridge Road at sunset with the cottonwoods rattling again. I knocked on 8 more doors. 6 of them signed on the porch. A retired high school principal named Coral Vance signed at her kitchen table with a shaking hand and told me she had moved to Pinecrest from Denver after her husband's stroke so she could live somewhere quiet. She had been fined $400 for planting a hydrangea she did not know required HOA pre-approval. She said she had not slept through the night since. I told her she could stop worrying about Cassidy Vanderfelt as of about 3 weeks from now. She cried into a dish towel. I finished the tea she had made me and asked if she wanted the paperwork left on the counter. By Sunday night, we had 53. 53 homeowners, 7 years of dues, 1 shell company, 1 board, 1 clipboard in my driveway, 3 weeks away from the worst night of her life. The more ground we gained, the louder Cassidy got. 3 days after I filed the formal removal petition, the water to my irrigation line went dry. Pinecrest controlled a non-potable irrigation loop that fed a handful of the uphill lots, including mine. I pay for that water separately, on a quarterly bill through the HOA. When I called the water company, they told me the HOA had instructed them to shut off my access pending a covenant review. I didn't argue. I hauled a 1,000-gallon tank up from the farm supply store in Conifer, filled it from my house spigot off the potable line, and gravity-fed my drip irrigation until we could fix it the right way. It took a day. I logged it in the file. The next morning, a county code enforcement officer showed up at my door holding a complaint. Someone had filed a claim alleging that my property was an active fire hazard due to destabilized slope and removed canopy. The officer walked the property with me for 40 minutes. He looked at my closed permit. He looked at my slash haul receipts. He looked at the spacing between trees. Then he looked at me and said, "Mason, this is the cleanest lot I've inspected this summer. Who filed?" I showed him the complaint form. The signature line said C. Vanderfelt, Pinecrest HOA President. He wrote across the top of the complaint in black pen, "No violation. File closed. Complaint not credible." Then he handed me a photocopy. "In case you need it," he said. I needed it. That same week, Cassidy started what Renee Callahan would later call the smear cycle. A Facebook group appeared called Save Pinecrest from Halloway. The first post was a photo of my cleared zone, with a caption accusing me of clear-cutting protected habitat. The second post accused me of running an unlicensed fire consulting business. My business is licensed with the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, under my own name. The license number is on the side of my truck. The third post accused me of having domestic violence allegations in my past. I have never had so much as a traffic ticket. I didn't comment. I didn't respond. I forwarded every screenshot to the Jefferson County Sheriff's harassment file I had opened in August, and I forwarded the defamation specifically to an attorney in Denver who agreed to send 1 letter for $300. Her letter was 2 pages long. It used the word retraction 9 times. It used the word damages 4 times. The Facebook group went quiet inside 72 hours. That weekend, Cassidy escalated to the zoning board. Her maneuver was subtle. She had a friend on the Jefferson County Planning Commission named Gordy Welch, who owed Brent Vanderfelt a favor on a rezoning application. She filed a nuisance referral, asking the Planning Commission to review whether my property's defensible clearing constituted an unpermitted change of use. It didn't. But the filing alone would require a hearing. The hearing would be public. The hearing would be recorded. That was exactly what I needed. I drove into Golden and sat down with Paulette Reyes and Chief Briggs for an hour. When I walked out, Chief Briggs had a subpoena ready for the September 18th commission meeting. So did Yvonne Keene. So did the AG's Consumer Protection Team. So did the DA's Economic Crimes Unit. Renee Callahan had cleared her schedule. 2 local TV stations had booked their crews. The night before the hearing, Piper sat on the porch rail while I grilled burgers. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Dad, I'm nervous for you." "Me?" "You're going to be in front of cameras." "I've been in front of fire," I said. "This is a clipboard." She smiled a little, and then quieter. "Mom would have liked to see it." I couldn't answer that for a minute. Finally, I said, "She's going to." I meant it. Cassidy had no idea that every desperate move she had made in the last 3 weeks, the water, the code enforcement, the Facebook posts, the zoning referral, was already in the folder that was going to be opened in public on September 18th. She thought she was burying me. She was handing me the shovel. 3 days before the hearing, Cassidy made the move that turned the case from a civil mess into a criminal referral. She sent the county a sworn affidavit. In it, she alleged under penalty of perjury that she had personally observed me operating a chainsaw on common area land belonging to Pinecrest Ridge Estates on the evening of July 8th. She described the time, the location, the direction of the wind, and the specific trees she claimed I had damaged. She signed the affidavit in front of a notary named Lacey Peck, who worked out of a UPS store in Evergreen. The affidavit was attached to a fresh criminal trespass and vandalism complaint filed with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. On July 8th, I was at a consulting job in Durango, 337 miles from Pinecrest Ridge. I had receipts, hotel, gas, 2 meals. I had client meeting notes. I had a signed contract dated 11 in the morning. I had a second signed contract dated 3 in the afternoon. I had a fuel receipt from a come-and-go in Pagosa Springs at 5:42 in the evening, with my credit card number on the slip. I had not been within 200 miles of a chainsaw that day. Filing a false sworn affidavit with law enforcement is a Class 6 felony in Colorado under Revised Statute 18-8-503. So is notarizing one knowingly. So is attempting to induce a criminal charge against an innocent person. I drove to the sheriff's office the morning after I got the notice. I sat down with a sergeant named Darlene Hoyt. I gave her the affidavit. I gave her the Durango hotel folio. I gave her the gas receipt. I gave her the consulting contracts. I gave her the screenshot of the Pagosa Springs come and go at 5:42. She looked at all of it and set it back down. "Mr. Halloway," she said, "would you like to press charges?" "Sergeant," I said, "I'd like to finish what I've already started. I'd like the affidavit to stay in the file, intact, unresponded to, until the hearing on the 18th. She nodded slowly. "You want her to think it worked. I want her to think she's winning. That's a specific kind of patience. It's been a long summer." Sergeant Hoyt almost smiled. Almost. I left the building with nothing in writing and a quiet understanding that a criminal referral would land on Cassidy's dining room table the morning after the hearing. Back at home, Piper was practicing violin again. She had moved on from scales to a piece she was preparing for her fall concert. Bach. It was the second movement of a sonata I had heard Claire play a dozen times on a little Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen. Piper was too young when Claire died to remember the recording, but somehow she had picked the same piece off a list at school. She had no idea. I had never told her. I stood in the kitchen doorway and listened for a minute. The notes climbed slow and steady. She missed one. She corrected it. She kept going. Outside, the wind had shifted down the ridge, and the cedars were giving off that faint, warm, resin smell they get in late September when the sap settles. I could hear the refrigerator hum and the violin in the wind. I could hear my own heartbeat. I thought for one quiet second about what the next 48 hours were going to do to Cassidy Vanderfelt's life. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. I felt like a man who had already buried people he loved, and who had learned a long time ago that victory does not fix a hole in your porch or a hole in your life. The most you can hope for is that when the fire reaches the tree line, you have done enough prep work that the house doesn't burn. I had done the prep work. I called Chief Briggs that night. I told him Cassidy had filed a false affidavit. I told him the sheriff had a copy. I told him the DA had a copy. I told him I wanted it introduced at the hearing. He said, "You sure?" "Yes." "Mason," he said quietly, "this is going to be a bad day for her." "She chose this a long time before I did," I said. We hung up. Somewhere above the ridge, an owl called twice. It was September 17th. The county hearing room in Golden seats 96. On the night of September 18th, it held 142. They had opened the overflow doors and pulled in folding chairs. 2 TV cameras were set up along the back wall. Renee Callahan sat in the third row with a yellow legal pad. Marilyn Ashford sat on my left. Deke Winslow sat on my right. 46 other Pinecrest homeowners sat behind us in a solid, quiet block. Cassidy Vanderfelt walked in wearing a cream linen blazer and pearl white heels. Brent followed 2 steps behind in a navy suit. She took her seat at the front table with a binder labeled Homeowner Violations, Holloway. She did not look back at the room. Commissioner Thea Barclay called the meeting to order at 7:02. The first 20 minutes were procedural. At 7:21, Cassidy rose to present her nuisance referral against my property. She had slides. She had photographs of my cleared yard. She had the word devastation again, this time in all capitals over a drone photo. She had, she said, a sworn affidavit from July 8th, proving I had operated a chainsaw on community land. We are asking this board, she said, to refer the Holloway property for public nuisance review and recommend condemnation. She sat down. She crossed her legs. She smiled faintly in my direction. Commissioner Barclay looked at me. Mr. Holloway? I stood. I did not carry slides. I carried the green Pinecrest folder, and I set it on the podium. Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you. I'll be brief. I'd like to respectfully defer the first 10 minutes of my response to Paulette Reyes, Jefferson County Wildfire Mitigation Officer, and Chief Harlan Briggs, Division of Fire Prevention and Control. The room shifted. Cassidy's smile didn't move, but her neck tightened. Paulette Reyes walked to the podium. She opened her own folder. She read for 6 minutes. She read my permit number. She read my closed mitigation file. She read the Colorado revised statute under which my clearing was not only legal, but required. She read the 2020 compliance deadline that Pinecrest Ridge Estates had failed to meet. She read the audit findings, completed that Tuesday, showing that the HOA's Wildfire Mitigation Services line item had produced 0 permits, 0 haul records, 0 county cost share claims, and 0 verifiable mitigation work for 7 consecutive fiscal years. She read the dollar figure, $302,400. The room made a sound I have only heard a few times in my life. It is the sound of 200 people realizing, at the same second, that they have been robbed. A man 3 rows behind me said, "Jesus Christ." A woman near the overflow door set her purse down in her lap and started rummaging through it for tissues. Someone in the back stood up, walked out, and came back in carrying a water bottle he did not drink. Renee Callahan was writing so fast I could hear the pen scratch from the podium. Coral Vance was holding Marilyn Ashford's hand. Chief Briggs came next. He was shorter, 5 minutes. He confirmed that the Pinecrest HOA had been operating in violation of the 2021 Colorado Wildfire Mitigation and Recovery Act since its passage. He confirmed that the Division of Fire Prevention and Control was opening a formal non-compliance case. He confirmed that Summit Ridge Land Services, LLC, had been referred to the State Licensing Board for immediate suspension of any contractor credentials. He confirmed, with a small, tight smile he did not bother to hide, that the agency's independent inspection of Pinecrest's 3 supposedly mitigated common area parcels had found fuel loads so high that a 15-mile-per-hour wind out of the southwest would carry a crown fire straight into the back of the clubhouse in under 4 minutes. He closed by saying that, in his professional opinion, the only homeowner on the ridge who had performed any meaningful wildfire mitigation in the last 7 years was Mason G. Holloway at 1247 Ridgeback Trail on a closed county permit using his own money. Then Yvonne Keene stepped forward from the side aisle. She was not on the agenda. She introduced herself as a state investigator. She announced that the Colorado Attorney General's Consumer Protection Section had opened an active investigation into Pinecrest Ridge Estates. She announced that the Jefferson County District Attorney's Economic Crimes Unit had accepted a formal referral for embezzlement, fraudulent encumbrance, and, here she paused, the filing of a false sworn affidavit in Jefferson County on September 15th. The room went very still. 2 Jefferson County Sheriff's deputies walked from the back wall to Cassidy's table. Sergeant Darlene Hoyt was one of them. She was calm. She was polite. She set a folded subpoena next to Cassidy's binder. Cassidy stood up halfway. This is harassment. Ma'am, Sergeant Hoyt said, please remain seated until I finish. I turned to look at Cassidy for the first time that night. Her pearl-white heels were trembling against the floor. Her eyes were wet. Her husband Brent was already on his phone. Commissioner Barclay cleared her throat. Madam President of Pinecrest Ridge Estates, she said, your referral is denied. Mr. Halloway's defensible space work stands. This commission is now forwarding tonight's findings to the state for further action. Is there anything else you'd like on the record? Cassidy opened her mouth. She closed it. I thought not, Commissioner Barclay said. She struck the gavel at 7:58. 11 weeks after the hearing, a Jefferson County judge accepted the 53-signature petition, found the Pinecrest Board in breach of fiduciary duty, dissolved the sitting board, and ordered a full election under court supervision. Cassidy Vanderfelt was barred from serving on any HOA board in Colorado for 10 years. Summit Ridge Land Services LLC lost its contractor license permanently. Brent Vanderfelt was charged under state embezzlement and wire fraud statutes, accepted a plea that included restitution, community service, and a felony on his record. The false affidavit charge stuck. Cassidy pled no contest. The restitution order alone came to $186,400, a pro rata refund to every homeowner who had paid into Line 47 since 2017. Marilyn Ashford got her $1,400 back, plus interest. Deke Winslow got 11 years of fees. The young woman who had slipped me the 10-word note got a check in the mail without ever leaving her name. The new Pinecrest board asked me to serve as president. I declined. I told them I would serve 2 years on a newly created wildfire readiness committee instead, unpaid, with no vote on covenants. I do not want to be a president of anything. I want to watch lines and clear junipers and sleep with my window open in the spring. The county used the Pinecrest case to propose a new ordinance. It passed in November. Every HOA in Jefferson County managing wildfire assessments now has to file annual compliance reports with the Wildfire Mitigation Office. Paulette Reyes called me the morning it passed. Mason, she said, that's you. That's your file. I told her it was everyone's file. It was too. The settlement included one piece that belonged only to me, a small, voluntary piece. $15,000 of my share I asked the court to release directly to Red Rocks Community College to seed an endowed scholarship. It is called the Claire Halloway Fire Ready Scholarship. It pays tuition for one student a year entering the college's Wildland Fire and Emergency Response Program. The first student, a young woman named Dallas Emberly from a ranch in Park County, met Piper at the scholarship dinner in May. They sat next to each other. They talked for 2 hours about a program Piper is now, cautiously, considering. If you had asked me the night the fine arrived, if this was where I would end up, I would have said no. I would have said I just wanted the clipboard off my property. Most of us just want the clipboard off our property. But every now and then, one of these women, and it is usually a woman just like Cassidy, pushes the wrong man on the wrong mountain on the wrong day. And when she does, the right answer is not to shout back. The right answer is to document, witness, file. That is all I did. That is all any of us did. We just wrote things down until the paper weighed more than she could carry. Pinecrest is a different neighborhood now. We have block captains. We have an open books quarterly meeting. We have a clearing weekend in May where 30 volunteers show up with chainsaws and haul slash to the transfer station in Deke's 1-ton and Marilyn's son-in-law's flatbed. Last May, we cleared 4 common area parcels in 6 hours. Chief Briggs drove up from Golden to look at it and pronounced it the best-run defensible space project in the county. Piper handed him a lemonade. The cedar smell on my porch is still there. The wind still comes down the ridge at 60 miles an hour in March. Claire's mug is still on the shelf above the sink. I still cannot make her banana bread taste right. But last month, for the first time since we moved up here, I heard Piper laughing on the porch with 3 friends on a Friday night. They were teenagers being teenagers. Loud, dumb, wonderful. I stood in the kitchen doorway and listened. That is what all of this was for. If you have ever been bullied by a clipboard, share your HOA nightmare in the comments. I read them. If this story made you feel a little lighter tonight, hit subscribe and stick around. Because next week, I'm telling you about the HOA that tried to seize a 90-year-old widow's vegetable garden, and the retired Army engineer next door who turned her own soil test against her.
He will stay with me after that story. Cassidy didn't fall because Mason got loud. She fell because she kept reaching for louder tunes, fake liens, smear posts, false affidavits, while he kept reaching for the same quiet tree. Document, witness, fire. That is the most always the pattern in these cases. The people who abuse HOA power are drunk on performance. The people who stop them are patient with paperwork. Mason's real advantage was not his firefighting background. It was that he knew how to wait with a folder instead of a megaphone. If there's one thing you take with you tonight, let it be this. Every petty fine, every bullying letter, every false complaint creates a paper trail. And a paper trail is the one weapon a small homeowner will always win with against a bad board. And the Claire Holloway Fire Ready Scholarship? That's the point. When good people win this fight, whole communities get something back. If you have ever been fined, bullied, or smeared by your own HOA, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe and hit the bell because next week I am telling you about the HOA that's trying to seize a 19-year-old Windows vegetable garden and the retired Army engineer next door who turned her own sewing test into the evidence that's at her.